Perfect. All right.
And that's, of course, appropriate. Our two guests tonight are the co-chairs of the Green New Deal Virginia, and each of them also has a large number of other roles that they play. Karen Campblin is our Virginia chapter transportation co-chair. She is also the president of the Fairfax County NAACP. And a fun fact is that Karen received a commending resolution from the General Assembly of Virginia this year for significant contributions to the advancement of environmental health and racial equity. She is in the Great Falls group in Northern Virginia. And we also have tonight presenting Lee Williams from our Falls of the James group. She is an executive committee member. She is the chair of our advocacy committee. And Lee is involved in everything you can imagine. And I will turn it over to Karen and Lee now for their presentation, which will be followed by questions, and you can enter those in the chat. Take it away.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. Again, I apologize for my delay in appearing, but thank you for joining us here today to talk about the Green New Deal, where we are, how we started, what we've been through, where we are today, and where we're planning to go tomorrow. So before we go to where we plan to go tomorrow, let's talk about how we started. We are a grassroots coalition comprised of over 80 or 90 different organizations and numerous individuals who've joined together to combat two of the biggest crises which we are currently facing, which is climate change and inequity. And this is a copy of our mission statement that the Green New Deal, through our advocacy and our program work, we propose to combat these two inadequacies while creating thousands of jobs, addressing the climate emergency, and restoring Virginia's environment. So the Green New Deal Virginia, through our grassroots efforts, we can reconnect the economy with the people, our health, our communities, and our ecosystem. So we're looking at it in a very holistic and robust manner. One of my slides are missing. So as I said, we are a grassroots coalition comprised of over 80 or 90 different organizations. And we have 5 major policy themes. When we first started back in 2020, we had a partner coalition, a partner summit, pardon me, in which we had all of our different partners, and then we had 50 different organizations that were a part of the Green New Deal. So we've grown significantly. And we had the summit and we talked about what is it that we want to do. And we came up with these 5 different policy themes, which is a just and equitable renewable plan, which leaves no workers behind, looking at large investments and improving opportunities for job training programs in the clean energy economy, which would include energy efficiency, smart grids, and so much more. Making sure that our legislation and our advocacy work focuses on clean air, water, and land for all Virginians, whether it's through mitigation or preventing toxic uses, and trying to identify better land management practices, particularly in the rural communities, as well as investing in local scale agriculture in communities across Virginia. And what COVID-19, the pandemic, has shown us is how important this local scale for food production and distribution truly is. And hopefully this would really bring the support that our local farmers and agricultural lands across Virginia really needs. And then this one we added as part of the Coalition Summit, which is focusing on equitable, affordable, and clean transportation systems. During the conversations, we discussed how transportation, as many of you are aware, is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions here in Virginia, as well as across the country. But transportation is so much more. It is part of the clean energy economy, yes, of course, but it is also an opportunity for mobility for communities to have access to better schools, better medical services, better quality of life, as well as an integral part of ensuring wealth building and generational wealth for all communities, including Black and Brown communities and low-income communities. So prioritizing an equitable and affordable clean transportation system was added to the major policy themes of the Green New Deal as a part of our discussion. So the Green New Deal is truly a grassroots, people-powered movement. Do you want to take this one, Lee?
Sure. So the graphic is pretty self-explanatory, but we wanted to emphasize the difference between equity and equality. So if you look at the photo, it's pretty self-explanatory, but equality means everybody gets the same vehicle. And it sounds good unless you look at the folks who are receiving the vehicle. And the first image obviously is a person differently abled in a wheelchair. Obviously that person cannot ride that bicycle. The very tall gentleman has a very difficult time riding the bike. The 5'4" woman is okay on the bike, and then the child, of course, the bike is too large. Equity means that you supply the vehicle that fits the needs of the community or the individual. That's about it. So we focus, so a lot of our, what we do to accomplish all of our policy goals is keeping the intersectionality of the economic, social, environmental issues at the forefront with equity in mind. So we look at everything through an equity lens.
Fantastic, thank you. So when we first started the Green New Deal Coalition, as a result of the summit that I mentioned earlier, we developed by the recommendation and the request of our community members that were in attendance, that we continue the conversation, but have a more in-depth conversation about the top issues that impact the quality of life for all Virginians. But we wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we address the intersectionality of climate, jobs, and equity. And so we hold that very dear to our hearts. And this is what we use when we talk to folks about the Green New Deal. Is imagine a 3-circle Venn diagram where one of the circles is climate, the other one is job, the other one is equity. And that center area that is shared, that shared space, that is the Green New Deal Virginia. And so we tasked all of our working groups as they think of the issues, as well as most importantly, the solutions for these issues, that they use that intersectional lens. And so the first time around when we developed our legislation, we had 9 working groups. And I'll just go over each of them very briefly. Some of them are pretty obvious, but some of them just may need a little bit of an explanation. So the democratic governance was ensuring legislation and advocacy efforts would focus on transparent and accountable government and ensuring that everyone has access to the voting process and the democratic process, as well as the decision-making processes within their own communities, as well as state. Of course, sustainable jobs is just making sure that everybody has access to quality paying jobs. And so we can move away from the model where people require or need to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay basic amenities such as transportation, housing, or even air and heat and water for their utilities. Social justice and health disparities looks at the barriers that may prevent communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, from being able to participate in their community as well as the economy to their best, at their full potential, whether it's removing ban in the box or forever barring issues. And that's some of the things that social justice would look at, as well as health disparities, is how do we make sure that frontline communities have access to affordable medical services, because we understand that frontline communities have higher rates of asthma and those types of illnesses. And then, of course, food and agriculture, I alluded to a little bit before, is just focusing on that micro grid and shortening or food distribution process and producing systems, and encouraging more micro systems, as well as food community gardens, and trying to get rid of what we see today, in which we have local farmers struggling, as well as food deserts. These two should never coexist in Virginia. As well as our next working group is our defossilization, energy efficiency, and renewables. This is the group that produces our main Green New Deal Act, as well as our fossil moratorium bill, and looking at all of the energy policies and laws. And then our healthier, sustainable rural communities. We identified that there was a possibility that our rural community issues would overlap with all of the other issues that you see in front of us. However, the focus and the solutions for the rural communities differ than that for the urban as well as the suburban communities. So we thought in the beginning, we really need to do a deep dive to identify what those solutions are in order for us to incorporate it and make sure that we don't forget the rural communities. And then, of course, healthier air, land, and water, which I discussed earlier, along with the sustainable cities and transportation. Those are our 8 policy working groups. And then we had one working group that was tasked and still is tasked, with developing our information materials and helping us distribute and disseminate information to all Virginians. And so these are the policies that were presented as part of the 2020 general legislation. And one of my slides is not showing up. Oh, great. So we presented, of course, we had our flagship moratorium bill, the Green New Deal Act, which unfortunately was not heard and was killed in the Appropriations Committee, and unfortunately did not make it out to the floor. But the bills that we were able to pass in 2020 included, we supported one of our coalition partners in developing the Environmental Justice Act. And that was passed in 2020. It was patroned by Delegate Markeem. He also was able to pass House Bill 573. It passed the House, Senate, was signed by the governor, which developed a funding source for community solar installation on low income and religious institution, public schools, and community buildings. Unfortunately, this bill has not received any funding yet. And this is something that we're going to have to make sure that they don't forget, but it is a pilot grant program that we hope to will be launched shortly. And then the third bill was House Bill 585, which was passed patroned by Delegate Guzman, and it was the first piece of our sustainable cities and transportation, in which we are doing making sure that all of our transportation decisions here in Virginia also includes strong consideration to affordable housing as well as land use, and ensuring that as we move forward and transition over to an electrified infrastructure, that the low income and minority communities receive the resources and infrastructure in an equitable manner. But not only that, ensuring that improvement does not equate to gentrification and displacement. And how do we make sure that everybody would be able to have access to I'm sorry, and making sure that there are no planning and subdivision regulations that prevents communities from being able to participate in some of the what do you call it, innovative practices that can help improve not only lower their energy burden, but also allow them to add improvements to and energy efficiency improvements to their homes without impacting livability and affordability in their communities. And of course, we supported Delegate Guzman with a resolution to declare a climate emergency, which unfortunately it passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate, and it was reintroduced in 2021, which Lee's going to go into more details in. Do you want to start here, Lee?
Oh, great. So this looks very familiar. So after our first year, we had a summit. We had a summit the first year, which helped us define who we were going to be for our first legislative session. And we actually had 10 bills. We had the 9 that Karen just went over, and then the resolution. And the next year we had another summit in April. And we realized that some of our working groups were a little bit redundant. So the coalition decided to fold in our rural, our communities and food, our healthy land, air, and soil groups into other groups. And then add a new one called Funding the Green New Deal. So pretty much the same thing: democratic governance, sustainable jobs, social justice and health disparities, food and agriculture, which we split. Our second year, we split into 2 leaders for that group. So one could work on regenerative soil health, and one could work on food distribution infrastructure. Our DEAR group stayed pretty much the same: sustainable cities and transportation. Spoiler alert, third year, we are going to add a couple subcategories to this to spread the wealth and the brain power amongst cities and transportation and fair housing. And the new one to the group is Funding the Green New Deal. And it's really exciting. It's about land banks. It's about infrastructure banks. And we have a fabulous working group leader there. And stay tuned. We're going to do some big things based on what's happening on the federal level. So it's very exciting. And then again, the outreach and education group. I just wanted to note though, before we move on to the next slide, so since we are kind of born of Sierra Club a wee bit, we adopted the YEMES principles of organizing. And for some of you who aren't familiar with it, I just wanted to briefly touch on what that means. So it means be inclusive. I'm sorry, my camera's off. I'm sorry to put it back on. We try to be as inclusive as we can. And we believe that to achieve societies that include all people in decision-making, we have to make certain, remove barriers, first of all, and then make a huge effort to move at a slower pace so that all people that are invited to the table can actually pull a seat up to it. Case in point, most people want to work 9 to 5 in this line of work. And when we have a volunteer base, you can't operate 9 to 5. You have to be flexible and work after business hours and into the evening or on the weekends. And so that creates a lot of a slowing of the process. You can't get a quick turnaround. If you send somebody an email at 9 o'clock in the morning, they might not be able to answer your email till they get off work at their real job to get back to it. So it's been a learning curve for folks who want fast response, and but we've emphasized that the bottom up organizing, and believe that the only way we can exceed the only way we can succeed with our goals of inclusivity and equity is to just pump the brakes and allow the time needed for the conversations to evolve. We don't want to rush folks, but it certainly it provides credibility to our working process and to the outcome from our work, that it is truly the voices of the Commonwealth of Virginia informing the policy choices. And it's important that we allow folks to speak for themselves. And it's easy for somebody like me to really I have a real problem, and Karen knows, with dead air. And so some folks are more introspective and take long pauses. And I've really had to learn not to jump into that silence to allow folks to continue their thought process and all. So it's been really interesting to work with in solidarity and mutuality and really come together. And our group is very disparate. We have over 90 working groups, and some of them are big. Most of them are grassroots, dirty feet, dirty hands, frontline organizers. And we've built some really fun relationships built on respect. And we've learned how to adapt and allow spaces for all of this work to happen. So I love it. I think it's been transformative for so many of us. And we all are really still, we're rolling into our 3rd year and are all really very excited about participating the next year. So stay tuned. Our next summit, where we will reshuffle all of these priorities, happens at the end of April. And it's going to be a plenary with our working groups, as well as our leadership from all of our coalition partners. It's not open to the general public. We're really going to get down to work. We've changed our Venn diagram this year. It's now, instead of just climate, jobs, and equity, we are going to be looking at climate, jobs, care, and justice. And that's kind of going to be our new framing for next year. Thanks, Karen. I kind of went off on that organizing bit, but I thought it was important for folks to hear. Thanks. This is a quick synopsis of what we did in 2021. I'll just, the first 4 bills on this slide had a hard time getting assigned to committee. And once they got to committee, they were never docketed or never put on the agenda. So they were never discussed. And again, it was our Green New Deal Act. We thought we would be smart and take the moratorium piece, the fossil fuel moratorium piece, out of the Green New Deal Act as a standalone bill, thinking it would have a better chance to make it across the finish line. It met the same fate. It was sent to a committee and then ignored. Our Lee Carter's right to work bill, repeal right to work bill, it was our 2nd time at bat, his 4th time at bat with this particular bill, and it didn't get a hearing. And Delegate Elizabeth Guzman's climate emergency resolution that had made it out of the House over to the Senate the first year died in the dark and was never heard. Thanks, Karen. 3 bills were laid on the table or left in committee before they even reached the floor for a vote. Senator Boysko's Senate Bill 1330, paid family and medical leave, and Delegate Ibrahim Samira's HB 1756, which was a fabulous campaign finance reform bill. It didn't allow folks running for office or incumbents to take money from regulated monopolies which would include, not even monopolies, that's not the right word, public service corporations. Sorry, I had to pause there. So that would include any of the large utility companies, including telecoms. And his other bill was a land bank bill, which sounded fabulous, but they didn't want to hear it. So that died as well. The next set of bills were defeated. They made it to crossover, went over to the Senate side. It was really tragic. I know Sierra Club, Connor and Bob Shippey made put a lot of time and effort into the Environmental Justice Act bill. We had one on the House and one on the Senate. And when they crossed over, they mixed them all up and they took all the good things out of it. Delegate Simon's bill ended up being the stronger one, but then that died on the Senate side. Senator Hashmi's was the last one standing, and it was not able to be reconciled in committee after session ended. And then our minimum wage bill. So last year there was a minimum wage bill. Remember, everybody was going to get a $15 minimum wage over the course of a number of years, which was a little bit slow, very slow. So it was not a perfect bill, but there was a farm worker exemption in it. And if COVID taught us anything, it was how important our farm workers were. And this was just devastating. The fact that this bill was just left to die in the Senate. Next slide, thanks. The following bills were from our coalition partners, and we made the decision at the beginning of our session. So the first year that we had Green New Deal legislation, there were 10 bills. This year, for 2021, we were looking at 25 bills. And as a volunteer organization, there was no way we could have lobbied strongly enough for all of them. So we made the decision early before the session began to let some of the bills go to our stronger coalition partners, and we would act as support and come to committee meetings, but we wouldn't create the memes for social media or the action alerts for social media, but we would amplify it. So the first bill was Delegate Keem's EV bus bill. The second one was Delegate McQuinn's Equitable Public Transit Study Bill, which is super. Karen will fill you in more if you want more detail on that one. Clean car standards was ours from last year that we couldn't get across the finish line. And this year, a lot of the folks who are transportation wonks really wanted to do a great job on it. And Green New Deal during COVID isn't as effective as Green New Deal without social restrictions. Our folks can't show up. We can't, bring our signs. So it's a lot harder to have a grassroots impact when you're in a Zoom room and you are, on mute. So we made the decision because of COVID to kick those first three to our larger partners who had the staff to handle them the way they needed to be handled, and they all passed. And the fourth one was a new one. It was a bill that Kay Corey, one of our champions, carried. We weren't against it. We just didn't have the bandwidth to help support it. But it was a percentage of payment program bill, which is important to amend parts of the Virginia Clean Economy Act from last year. And we did testify for her in committee, but we just couldn't. It was not one of our bills. Thanks, Karen. And then these 9 Green New Deal priority bills passed both the chambers and were sent to the governor's desk. Paid sick leave by Delegate Guzman, local food and farming infrastructure grant program by Delegate Razul, affordable housing by Delegate Samira, and Karen talked about that one. That was, oh, excuse me, no, she didn't. The TOD comprehensive plan by Delegate Samira, that was an add-on to Delegate Guzman's bill from last year. We had a pesticides bill that we didn't really have help. We didn't help write it, but the patron asked us to support him in it. It was on our list of things we wanted to do, but our food and ag group was busy with the soil sequestration, carbon sequestration bill, and the local food and farming infrastructure bill, and they didn't have the bandwidth for it. So we just picked it up and helped advocate for it. Unfortunately, although it passed, it doesn't really have any teeth to it. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, but I think we'll come back and take another look at it next year, hopefully, and add some really measurable actions to it so that we can clean up what we're doing in our yards. Water is a human right resolution, as well as racism is a public health crisis resolution, both by Delegate Aird, passed, and we are anticipating building out from those resolutions next year. And a local green banks bill from Delegate Kate Corey passed. It's not a depository bank, so it wouldn't have been, it's not quite what we wanted, but it did pass, and we'll build on that again next year. And then the building codes and energy efficiency bill that did, again, Delegate Corey carried for us was really a Sierra Club, a Virginia Conservation Network bill, but one that we had, and we all worked together on that one. And I think that's it. Oh, in the lull since the session ended, we have been very busy with our partners on federal issue problems around unionization. So we've been working on the PRO Act. We were doing Wednesdays with Warner the whole month of April. Come out and join us in Richmond. We are not doing one tomorrow because I had the problem with the Congresswoman Spanberger's meeting. So we are also working with VCU adjunct union folks who are trying to get benefits and fair salaries at VCU. And we will be working with SEIU as they try to get collective bargaining in all the districts. So collective bargaining passed last year. Unfortunately, all that allows is that folks need to go to the localities and then ask the localities to pass an ordinance that allows them the opportunity to collective bargain. So we're working with the electrical union in Virginia Beach, and they've just started the process. We're about 3 weeks into it. We're starting with the basics with the op-eds in the newspapers and organizing there. So, and then the Thrive agenda. On the national level is a big priority for Sierra Club National and Green New Deal and the Green New Deal Network, which is the rebranding of the Green New Deal for some of the Greens on the federal level. Sunrise is behind it, but that's what we're doing, kind of seeing where we can push now that we're not writing legislation, we're not busy in the General Assembly. So we are in the Thrive space for now until we start. After the summit, we'll hit the ground with our working groups and start crafting our policy for next General Assembly session in 2022. And I guess we'll just go to questions. Or Karen, did you want to add anything to close us out?
No, I look forward to the questions.
Great.
Okay, well, let's see. Nancy asked, what is the primary criticism of the Green New GNW? Is that Green New Deal, and your response to it, or GNW? What does that stand for?
GND?
Typo. Probably just a
Sorry,
typo.
I just meant the Green New Deal.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Can't type.
Well, it depends on which Green New Deal you're talking about. Some folks, we are Green New Deal Virginia. We can't do anything that the Green New Deal on the federal level can do. The Green New Deal on the national level is not constrained by budgetary concerns. They have the congressional purse, which they can open up. And as we know, whenever there's a national disaster or we need to bomb somebody, there's always trillions of dollars available to do, the cleanup or the, sending of the war machines. At the state level, it's a lot trickier. We are completely restricted by the budget. And so that's why we're very excited about the Thrive agenda, or excuse me, the Thrive Act now. And President Biden's jobs plan that he just released a week and a half ago. It's got $1 trillion in it. Our problem with that is we really think it's going to be we need to we need $10 trillion. And because we're talking about the federal government and the modern monetary theory proves that we can, as long as we don't mess with the inflation rate, we can just write checks all day long because we do not have a gold standard. And it's our money and it recirculates. And it's, they were talking about it a little bit today on the Thrive Act webinar, but I encourage you all to go to YouTube and look up Modern Monetary Theory, or just MMT, and Green New Deal, and it'll tell you how they're going to pay for it on the federal level. We really don't need to worry. But that's the big criticism. How are you going to pay for it? So as far as folks fighting with us, we have a different agenda because we can't pay for anything the way they can on the federal level. So we are struggling with that, which is why we have the new Green New Deal, how are we going to pay for it working group to help answer those questions for folks.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, and I have a question. Just how successful are other Green New Deal coalitions in other states as far as getting laws passed within the last year? And are they some similar type of laws that they're getting passed, or just, I'm just curious how we compare to other states?
I'll jump in. To my knowledge, we are a one and only Green New Deal state organization with a fleshed out coalition like this. We have a number of states like Maine, California, who've had resolutions, Green New Deal resolutions, but they're non-binding. There's no teeth to them. A lot of the states in 2019, 2020 went that route. We went that route. But as far as, you know, there's a lot of sunrise hubs across the nation, and they are more the face and ambassadors of Green New Deal in states. But I think we are the only Green New Deal organization.
Yeah, when we started in Virginia, we really, we did have a legislative piece, and it was a legislation focused. But as it was moving forward through the House, you know, it was, well, what is it that Virginia needs? And what is it that we're trying to address and find solutions for? And that's when it was pulled from legislation, and we started a, you know, grassroots community mobilization across the state, and reached out to as many organizations dealing with the environment, labor, economy, social justice, and said, look, in order for us to find the right solutions for Virginia, we need to break down those silos and look at how all of our issues impact and intersect, you know. And we made those questions, we asked those questions during our first summit. Okay, so what does labor protection really mean in the environmental space? Or what does social justice mean in economic development space? And having, you know, folks look into what other people are, you know, moving and what other people are asking for, so we can find that common ground and together work and advocate for that common piece. And so, you know, like Lee said, Green New Deal Virginia Coalition is the only statewide coalition. We've actually been contacted by other states like North Carolina that are actually starting their Green New Deal, and they saw our model in 2020 and saw that we had legislation, saw that we had presence not only in Richmond, but in community groups across Virginia, and wanted to know how they could set up as Green New Deal. And we've actually seen some smaller grassroots organizations within Virginia readjust and reorganize how they work, and realizing that we really need to break that silo and have those cross-discipline conversations.
And I'm laughing because we all knew we had to break out of our silos. And first thing we did was we created 9 working groups and put everybody back in their silos, right? So we learned the second year from that, and we sort of fixed it by asking folks from some, like outreach and education, to attend all the meetings, you know, assign one person for each working group. And our social justice and health disparities group have some of their members, you know, be in the defossilization, energy efficiency and renewables group, and the food and ag group, and, you know, and the labor. So labor was in Deer, and Deer was over here. And so we did it last year, but it still wasn't quite enough. We were still siloed. So this year we're shaking it up even more, and we're gonna just spread it all out and see if we have a faster communication, less wordsmithing at the 11th hour, you know, figure it all out earlier in the process, so that folks, you know, see the problems, the flaws early in the game. But yeah, we siloed right back up again.
That's great. And how many active people roughly do you have working in the Green New Deal Coalition?
I think it depends on where, you know, we've got in all of our different working groups, I would say we have maybe anywhere between 5 and 10 active person within each group.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have social media, Facebook, we've got Action Network. So we've got our Action Network has, you know, close to 1,500 folks. So we do have responses on, you know, doing action alerts and those things like that. And then of course, having our you know, and this is something that we really need to try and get more help on, is with coalition partners helping disseminate information as well. You know, we can, you know, push things out, and we get, you know, couple dozen likes or, you know, a few shares, which is great because that's a really good exposure. But it could be, you know, there's room for so much more. And you know what, whenever we talk to folks, we say, you know, our table is always growing. It's not a set size, and come one, come all is really what it is. So even with those numbers where they may sound great, it could be more, and it should be more. It really should be a lot more, I feel. So 2022, we're going to be, or no, this is 2021. Oh boy. You know, we're going to be really working to kind of continue to build our community.
But it's been really exciting. I mean, the last 6 months, we've had 3 national organizations reach out wanting to partner with us. Actually, now 4, because we just had another one. The XR group, the national group, just brought us into their coalition of all the XR. Extinction Rebellion is XR. It's a European group that crossed the pond, and it's taking root here. They're very, very active over in England and France. But also, like, Bill McKibben liked something we did on Instagram, or no, it was Twitter. And the Democratic National Committee Climate Council likes us all the time. I mean, they're always like on our stuff. So, you know, we're getting some attention higher up. They're noticing. And, you know, the Democratic Party of Virginia adopted a resolution to adopt Green New Deal Virginia and the Green New Deal 3 years ago or 2 years ago. What else did they do? Oh, they also said they were going to support repeal right to work. So we have, you know, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of, you know, those darn petitions. It's like between the Zoom calls and the petitions, I think folks are ready to, you know, chuck everything, all the technology out the window. But there's 4 things going on right now that we're doing. We have the petition to the letter on Action Network that goes to the governor asking him to declare a climate emergency. He has the constitutional authority to declare a climate emergency and issue a full moratorium on new fossil fuel projects and permits in the state of Virginia. And that would take care of so many of our problems, because right now, all the pipeline fighters and compression station fighters is like whack-a-mole. I mean, every time you kind of think you got one fire under control, they're trying to build one somewhere else. And so if he did that, that would be amazing. In the same Action Network action, you can then send a letter to your congressperson and our 2 senators, because there is a House and Senate bill asking for sign-ons to tell Biden to declare a climate emergency. So that's the letter. And then the XR group that just contacted us, there's a national movement. There's a petition going just to President Biden asking him to declare a climate emergency. And then the city of Richmond, we have a city councilwoman who is writing a resolution asking the city to declare a climate emergency. And there's something else in there somewhere. Oh, I guess the Thrive Agenda. We're trying to get folks to sign on to the Thrive Agenda. I'm lucky. I moved into the city and all my city council reps are on board, or my one city council rep is on board, Stephanie Lynch, and McKeechin is like a rock star. He's writing all this environmental justice legislation, and he signed the Thrive Act or the Thrive Agenda, and I'm sure he'll sign the Thrive Act now that it has, legislation, a bill number. So
We have
it's
a couple
exciting.
of questions that you might want to address. Let me do this one first. This is from Kirk Bowers. The rural areas of southwestern Virginia and Appalachia are struggling to provide good paying, healthy jobs. The folks in that part of the state often feel they're forgotten. What are you doing to work with groups in Southwest Virginia? How will the Green New Deal help them or address their concerns? And what about coal miners who have lost their jobs? We're talking about just transition there.
I don't know who wants to jump in. So our Sustainable Jobs Working Group leader is meeting weekly with union folks, and specifically pipeline guys, and trying to figure out the answer to that question. I mean, I know there's a lot of folks looking at revitalizing our coal fields and using all kinds of different ideas to bring jobs to those communities. But what they're not doing is talking to those, or what hasn't been done until recently, is actually talking to those communities and asking them what they want. Green New Deal specifically, we only had that one bill, which was the Farm and Food Infrastructure Bill. And it's a grant program that helps smaller sustainable farmers, whether it's rural or urban farmers, get their products to market. And that's where we started. And it became a 2-year process because of some shenanigans in the General Assembly. So we kind of got stuck on that one piece of legislation for 2 years, but I'm not sure what we'll do next year. That's what the summit's for. We decide what we're going to do for the next year. But right now, anything's possible. If you have any great ideas, we'd love to hear them.
I will say
I think that kind of goes along with our table is always growing. And so we don't really have a lot of partners or any individuals that are in the community, but some of our legislation also tries to include worker protection and finding funding that would support retraining, certification, and access to getting into and being able to participate in the clean energy economy. Part of the sustainable jobs conversation is also ensuring that, they're aware that even though we're doing a fossil fuel moratorium and we're asking for the end of fossil fuels and pipeline, that there's things that we can do retrofitting. So identifying what those new demands and needs are going to be. And that's part of that workforce and labor protection work that we're working on, and identifying partners that are already doing it so we don't have to start from scratch. But if anybody knows of any of coalition partners and or individuals that should be brought to the table, let us know. And another thing is they don't necessarily have to prescribe to the Green New Deal Virginia. All we, just getting issues and or solutions will definitely help a lot. So we've got members whose organization is not necessarily a part of Green New Deal, but they are able to attend the meetings and provide feedback.
Back to Nancy's question, one of the major criticisms
Alright.
we have is
Sustainable jobs, meeting. I was just gonna say one final piece is our sustainable jobs their meetings will resume. So that is one piece. Do you work with Virginia Interfaith? Yes. Our committees are after the summit, our committees are gonna resume their meetings. So there's gonna be opportunities to join in those meetings as we develop what our program and the policy is gonna look like in the future. And then we're going to be, again, working with our coalition partner and supporting what they're also working on.
This is Glenn. I'll just add that there are some significant provisions in the American Jobs Act that address these issues of just transition because it's a pretty expensive proposition. Two other quick questions. One is
if I could just jump in real fast, I wanted to go back to Nancy's question about our criticisms. And it's because our policies do provide those just transition languages, and we're adamant about not taking them out. Our moratorium bill would have passed last year if we had removed the worker protections part. The fact that we stuck to our guns and kept those transitioning worker language in that bill killed it. Sorry.
Another question here relates to state gas tax. And let me just say, we actually approved an increase in the state gas tax that's being phased in over several years. And I know that the increase in the federal gas tax is on the table with regard to funding the American Jobs Act. If anybody else has comments about that, that's a question from Steve. We got one other question here. And that is, are you working with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light?
They are one of our coalition partners, yes. And going back to and actually, I think finding a funding source for transportation, you're absolutely right, is a crucial piece in addition to some of these infrastructure bills that's happening on the federal level. We still have some deficiencies here in Virginia. So there are a lot of other, there's some innovative, or what people think are innovative solutions, such as, looking at some carbon pricing programs. So Virginia is in the process of joining the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which is a multi-state collaborative for a carbon pricing program. And so I guess Sierra Club as national is kind of on a hold to develop a position as to whether or not we're going to support the Transportation and Climate Initiative, because there's some significant equity issues. And so as we look at our transportation funding, and try to identify new ways to pay for our infrastructure, equity has to really be a big part of that consideration, especially as we start to transition over to electrified infrastructure. That gas taxes is just the revenues generated from that gas tax is just going to slowly go away. So how do we continue to pay for transportation as we lose that transportation funding source that's been around for decades?